Alrighty, let's get on down with this very last chapter because it is the end. So let's get on to it then. Taboo by Repiece, Chapter 4, Taboo. Once again, this is Lemon at this point. So has it really been 1 week since I did that? I guess I was so good that Rito and I went on a date that I couldn't help myself. And yet, what I did was wrong, wasn't it? I can't help this feeling in the back of my head that I can't be with Rito and can't become someone who would take care of him for the rest of his life, like what a wife would do. That's right, because we're siblings, we can't get married and I can't become his wife. Why? Mikon was annoyed. It was not that she was bothered by the fact that Rito was playing a video game with Lala, but the fact that Momo was leaning a little closer to her brother. Ever since Mikon told herself that she wanted to spend more time with Rito, it never happened usually because of the antics of the Deviluk sisters hugging Rito all the time. She hated it, but she wondered what she could do about it. It was obvious to her that Rito was a playboy, attracting almost every girl that he hung out with. But no matter how much of a playboy he was, he never showed any attraction to her. Sighing to herself, she stood up from the couch and walked toward the kitchen, hoping to get a glass of water to clear her thoughts. She did so, but she became surprised when Rita walked into the kitchen as well. She heard him mumble something, but couldn't make it out. She could feel herself get warmer and warmer the closer Rita walked toward her. She wasn't sure what he was going to do, but her eyes widened when she felt his hand on her shoulder. She couldn't help but fluster as he then leaned his chest close to her body as she began to panic. What is he doing? Mika thought as she closed her eyes only to feel him lift her hand off her shoulder. She slowly opened her eyes to see Rito was no longer behind her, but near the fridge, gulping down a glass of water as she managed to fit two and two together. I see. He was just leaning against me to get a glass of cup from the cupboard, she thought, slightly disappointed. Ah, that's the stuff, Rito exclaimed, wiping his mouth from the water that he drank as he looked over to Mikon, noticing a small frown on her face. Is something wrong, Mikon? Mikon was instantly taken away from her thoughts at Rita's question and looked over at him, cheeks slightly red. It's nothing, Rita, she answered, getting a raised eyebrow from Rito, who looked at her a little worried. However, he just shrugged it off, knowing if Mikon said she was okay, then she was, and placed the glass in the sink and walked out the kitchen, allowing Mikon to release a breath of air that she didn't know she was holding. Baka Mikon, getting all flustered like that, she muttered quietly to herself as she narrowed her eyes down at the glass of water she was holding, as she watched her fingers begin to fidget the cup slightly. She let out a sigh as she didn't turn back to look at the clock and noticed it was getting late. Finishing a glass of water, she decided to take a quick shower before going to bed. Mikan woke up with a start as she stared in front of her, her chest beating fairly quickly as she placed her hands over her heart to try and calm it down. Mikan was never the type to dream about perverted things, but for some reason she had been dreaming such dreams ever since she went on that date with Rito. She felt ashamed about it, but at the same time she was also sad because of the fact that those dreams could never happen to her, especially since the dreams were about her and Rito doing things that are, like Yui would say, indecent. Yui. Once Mikan calmed her fast-beating heart down, she rose from her bed and decided to get a glass of warm milk to help her get back to sleep. I got neighbors. As she made her way down the hallway, she stopped in front of Rita's warm think room and looked at it. She knew he was probably sleeping. The question was there someone else sitting with him? She felt herself frown, but at the same time curious as she gulped before slowly reaching for the doorknob. She quietly opened the door and peeked inside, only to find Rito sleeping soundly in his bed with no one but him on it. She let out a sigh in relief, but then felt her body move on its own as she entered the room and closed the door behind it. Even using the lock Rito decided to finally put on his door, despite the fact he always forgot to lock it. Oh dear. She fought the choice. Blah, 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 blah. She fought off the voice in her head to stop what she was doing, and she wanted to. But her body did not agree with her, and before she knew it, she was looking down at Rachel's sleeping face as her body was just above his, her legs between her brother's. "Oni-chan," she whispered as she found herself lowering toward his. Oh wait, as she found herself lowering her head toward his. Grammar trouble. She was inches away from Rito's face as she could feel his warm breath against her lips, causing her to tingle in excitement. She didn't know what was going on with her, but she couldn't stop. Her lips were inches away from his, but she stopped when the sound of thunder in the night sky caused her to freeze in fear as she covered her ears and rolled off of Rito and onto the open space of his bed. Mika was afraid as she could hear the rain pour down from outside as her body began to shake. She hated thunderstorms, and she hated especially during night when she would cower by herself in her room underneath her sheets and only fall asleep when the storm ended. Suddenly she heard Rito grumble in his sleep, and before she knew it, Rito had one of his arms around her, hugging her closer to his chest as she could feel his warm breath against her ear. Mika couldn't help but let out a moan as she felt herself get closer in contact with him as she reminisced the time when the two of them were younger. She missed the days when it was only the two of them, and maybe the times when they spent together was the starting point for when she felt these feelings toward Rito. She always loved the warm feeling her brother had, and the nice and comforting smell that his body emitted, which always seemed to calm her down when she was younger, and even now. Mika smiled at this and looked back down at his arm, which was slightly pressed below her breast as her cheeks became flustered. "Rito," she said, even though she knew he was probably too deep in his sleep to hear her. "Do you remember when we were little that we used to sleep like this whenever there was a storm?" She continued narrowing her eyes. "How much did I grow?" she suddenly asked, even surprising herself as she used her free hand and placed it on top of his. She then slowly moved his hand up toward her chest and placed it slowly against her breast as she let out a gasp. She loved the feeling of Rito's hand against her breast, and she wanted him to do more. She began to move his hand around her breast, and she let out gasps and moans at the feeling of her breast being massaged by Rito's warm hand. "Rito, Megan?" Megan's eyes widened as she heard Rito's voice and felt him starting to sleep as she began to panic. "Well, what are you... Huh?" She heard Rito yell as he saw his hand on her breast. "What? What?" He tried to say something, but he couldn't as his mind was clouded with hundreds of thoughts as his face got as red as a beet. "Rito, this..." Megan tried to explain as she could feel Rito trying to remove his hands from her breast. But to his surprise, Megan held his hand in place. "Megan?" he asked, surprised at what she was doing. "Please, Rito," Megan played with Rito, which not surprised Rito, but herself as well. "Please, Megan," Rito answered at her name as he felt his own body move on his own as he squeezed her breast, causing the young girl to moan. He followed it up by gently moving her breast in a circle as Megan felt herself get warmer and wetter the longer Rito continued to move his hand. Oh dear. Rito didn't understand why he was doing this, especially since he was doing this to his own little sister. Sweet home Alabama. He knew this was wrong. He knew that Sylvie shouldn't do something like this. But why didn't Megan stop him? Did Megan think about doing stuff like this with him? He wasn't sure anymore. He in fact wasn't in control of his body anymore as he felt his hand move down and then climb back under Megan's shirt as he grabbed her breast under her bra. Megan was surprised at his action, but let out moans as she loved the feeling of Rito's bare hand rubbing against her breast as she could feel a certain place between her legs get wetter. Mustering up her strength, she grabbed Rito's hand and flipped him onto the bed as she sat on top of him. Rito's hand still massaging her breast as he looked up at her with wide eyes and a flushed face. "Oni-chan." Rito was surprised that she called him by Oni-chan, but forgot all about that as Megan lowered her lips and crushed them into Rito's. His eyes widened as far as he could as Megan tried to enter his mouth with her tongue and eventually gave in and opened his mouth to allow it. Megan expressed how happy she was that Rito gave her permission to enter a kiss as she explored Rito's mouth with her tongue. They're doing tongue. Lovely. But also Sweet Home Alabama. She pulled away from Rito's mouth due to the loss of oxygen as he stared into Rito's eyes with all the love she had for him. Rito noticed this in her eyes as he couldn't believe how much she loved him. He knew she did, but only thought it was like family love. But her eyes didn't say that. Her eyes had the same love that romantic couples had that he'd seen in movies. Mikon, he said her name, which made the smile on her face grow wider. Oni-chan, I love you. I love you so much. Rita's eyes widened her declaration, and he didn't know what to do. He, however, did the only thing he could have done at the moment, and just like anyone else in such a position with a beautiful girl, he went by his instincts. He leaned upward and kissed Mikon back, surprising her at first, but she smiled at the kiss as she was overwhelmed by her feelings and became the happiest girl at that moment. She kissed back as they both opened their mouths and their tongues battled out as Rita sat up with his arms wrapped around Mikon's waist as she had her arms wrapped around his neck. Mommy, Dad, what's going on? Oh, they were wrestling. Rita pulled back from the kiss as he removed Mikon's shirt over her head and then kissed her again while reaching behind her and unclasping her bra, which fell in the small area between the two. As soon as Rito pulled that back, he looked down at his sister's small breasts, and his gaze became embarrassing for Mikon. However, he gave her a smile before he leaned forward and placed his mouth around one of her breasts and began sucking on the erect nipple, while the other was tended by his right hand. Mikon let a loud gasp and arched her back as the feeling of Rito's mouth around her breast was nothing like she ever experienced before, which included what she did back on their date. Oni-chan, she moaned as he took the liberty of sucking on the other breast. Mikon loved what Rito was making her body do as she grabbed his head with her hands and pulled him closer to her chest. Once Rito finished tending to her breast, he kissed her again before creating a trailing of kisses down to her neck, collarbone, and finally down to her breast once again. Mikon, Rito whispered as he lifted her off of him and gently down on the bed as he moved his hands down to her pants and slowly removed them to reveal her wet panties. Mikon found herself flustered as he gazed at her panties as she moved her head away from him in embarrassment. Please, you're looking at my... It's embarrassing, Mikon told him in a quiet, weak voice. Rito looked back at her and smiled. But Mikon, you look so beautiful, he told her as tears formed at the corner of her eyes. Oni-chan, she said with all the love she felt for her brother in her voice as Rito gave back his own warm smile and carefully removed her panties, revealing her wet womanhood. Oh my! Rita was amazed at how wet she was and slowly spread her legs apart before lowering his face down to her pussy, and then began using his tongue. Surprising Mikon as she let out a gasp and moaned each time she felt Rita's tongue flick her clitoris. Oh, so it's called clitoris now, it's not just clit. Well, clitoris is a term, but... Oni-chan, she moaned his name, which became music to Rito's ears as he entered her pussy with his tongue. Oni-chan. After a while, Mikon couldn't help herself as her orgasm hit her, which Rito slowly drank most of it. Mikon couldn't believe what she felt as she watched Rito lift his face from her womanhood and looked at her. Mikon, you taste sweet, he told her, making her blush as red as she possibly could as he kissed her again. Mikon could taste her juices from within Rito's mouth. Within Rio's? Man, that's bad. Rito's mouth as she explored his mouth, her tongue in a long and passionate kiss. When Rito pulled away, he looked down at Mikon as he knew what she wanted. Mikon, are you sure? Hi, Oni-chan. Please, I love you so much. So please, Mikon pleaded as Rito couldn't resist her plight as he nodded and kissed her one more time before he crawled back toward her entrance and removed his erect pants from his boxers. Oh God. Sexy time between siblings. Not the first time, but still. Mikon stared at his penis, with wide eyes and couldn't believe how big it was. Are you ready, Mikon? He asked his sister as she nodded her head and prepared herself for the pain she knew was coming. Rito gulped nervously as he lined himself up with her entrance before he slowly began inching her. Mikon moaned as he slowly entered into her and stopped when he felt a barrier and looked down at Mikon one more time. She gave him a nod to continue, and with one push he entered her, breaking the barrier as Mikon cried out in pain. Mikon, I'm sorry, Rito apologized and was ready to pull out, but Mikon wrapped her legs around his waist to prevent him from doing so. No, please don't. It's starting to feel better, she told him as he watched her calm herself down. Rito didn't move until Mikan gave him permission, as he didn't want to hurt her any more than what he did already. Okay, you can move, but slowly. Rito nodded his head as he pulled back and then re-entered her again and continued down a slow pace as her vaginal secretion and blood dripped down on the bed. Ugh. Rito couldn't believe what he was doing with Mika, but the feeling of him being inside her was amazing. Her vagina was very tight, which made it even better as he slightly quickened the pace. Mika, on the other hand, was the happiest person on earth right now, and the feeling of having sex with her brother was just the way her dream felt, but only 10 times as better. Faster, Oni-chan, she pleaded as Rito nodded his head, and then increased his speed as he lowered himself and kissed her while continuing to thrust inside her. Rito was close, and it did not help his cause when he felt her vaginal walls tight around his member. Mika was close to her orgasm as well, and she made her mind up at the moment, and then what? Oh, she wanted Rito to come inside her. Yes, you heard that right. Yes, she knew the chances that she might become pregnant, but she didn't care. This was probably the only chance of her having sex with the brother, and she didn't want it to go to waste. Mikan, I'm going to come, he told her as he grunted and quickened his thrust. Please, Oni-chan, come inside me, she told him. But please, she shouted as she wrapped her legs tightly around him and hugged his body close to hers as her mind suddenly went white. She let out a scream as she climaxed and felt Rito's hot seas into her womb. Oni-chan! Mikan screamed to the heavens as Rito slowed down his thrust before he moved himself from her, rolled over the side as both of them stared up to the ceiling, both trying to catch their breaths. Mikan slightly opened her eyes and turned her head to look at Rito. She gave him the warmest smile she ever gave. Arigato, Oni-chan. I love you. She hugged his arm as she fell asleep. Mikan knew what they both did was wrong. She knew what they did was taboo, but she didn't give a damn. The end. Author's notes. Thank you all for reading my story and your reviews. Your reviews make my work go around, and I hope you all enjoy Taboo and hope you read any of my future stories. Shane. Well, we finally got through that. So if you're feeling traumatized, it's okay. I'm traumatized just by looking at this. So, and I'll have lots of drink tonight. So thank you. Until the next time. Bye bye.